I also think just having a writing coach is the best tool that you can have to elevate your quality, because that's another person, someone who's experienced in writing.
Leaders Press is a USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling press with traditional distribution via Simon & Schuster. Thanks to their work, more than 500 entrepreneurs have been able to share their stories with the world, and 133 of their authors have become USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling authors in their own right. If you'd like to discover which type of book would best suit you, go to leaderspress.com/reveal. In this episode of the Leaders Get Published podcast, the Leaders Press team will talk about how a writing coach can help you get your book published.
I'm Alinka Rutkowska, the founder of Leaders Press. With me are my COOs, Grace O'Donnell and Deborah Braden, and this is the Leaders Get Published podcast. With us, we have a special guest, Megan Okonsky, Leaders Press head writer and writing coach. In this episode, we talk about working with a writing coach so that you can get published. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, we're super excited to have you here. And to start the conversation, I would want to hand this off to Grace, who has interviewed so many of our clients and produced so many amazing books. And she also works directly interfacing between the clients and yourself. So Grace, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Alinka. So there are four main reasons why people tend to need a writing coach. And so I thought it'd be really interesting to kind of talk about those. We've got kind of staying on track, motivation, deeper understanding of your work, and getting sold. And so first off, I just want to talk about the first one, staying on track. And I was wondering if you could give us a few pointers about how you do that as a writing coach, Megan.
So this is a kind of an easy one to start off with. It is, as a writing coach, you can work with a author directly and just kind of hold them accountable for how much they're writing, what they're writing, when they're turning it in. I know when I work on projects personally, I can get lost in the writer's block or make some excuses for, well, I don't have a deadline for this yet. Having a writer's coach gives you that deadline, gives you someone to be accountable to, and gives you a reason to get on your computer and start writing.
Yeah, time management is so key, I think, with a lot of our authors who come to us because they're really busy, important people. What about you guys? How do you think like a coach can help with that, Alinka and Deb, with staying on track? Is there anything else apart from goals?
The whip. Every writing coach needs to have a whip and be ready to use it. So I think that's the main thing. The accountability is that's how people get things done, and that's why you need a buddy. And usually peer-to-peer relationships sort of dissolve, when there's no monetary commitment. I find that things don't work, just like when you go to a mastermind and there's always one or two people that are there because they won it or they got it as a bonus. Those are the one or two people that are not going to take any action, and they're not going to grow their business, because if you have a financial commitment, you want your ROI. So you're going to do the work to get it. That's why I think it's really important to have an accountability partner, whether it's a writing coach or project manager, to make sure that you're moving along, and there has to be the buy-in on both ends from both parties. So yeah, that's why we do this here. Megan, what do you find is the most challenging potential issue when working with a client as a writing coach?
So far, staying on track has actually been okay because there's a clear expectation of, okay, you're going to get chapter 1 to me by this week, chapter 2 by this week, chapter 3 by this week. So that has not been as much of a challenge as some of the more abstract issues that come with being a writing coach. When you are sitting down to write down a story, you are taking all this information and it's all of these messages that have been inside of your head that have gone through multiple rounds of, you've thought through everything, you've experienced these things, you've, looked at all angles of it, and you want to put all of that information into one story with a clear message for readers. And that's not always easy to do. There are times where authors might think that they're getting the message across to their readers. And it's only because when they read it, they have the context, they have the experience, they have the knowledge where they can pick apart all of the different ideas when they're writing and say, okay, I see how this connects to this. I see how this connects to this. That's not as easy for a reader who has no idea or context for the ideas that our authors want to share. So that is communicating that to our authors from the get-go, I think can be kind of a challenge to overcome, because trying to read your book from another person's perspective can be really tough, especially if you don't have your audience defined as well. So one of the things we want to do in our first few sessions is to define your audience, who they are, how much they know about the subject, and where you can have this conversation from them and where you can take it.
Amazing. What else should we discuss, Grace?
Oh, yeah. So I love that you're talking about who your audience is. I think that's one of the trickiest things. And I know some of the other things that a writing coach can really help with is book proposals and maximizing your author platform. And I was just wondering, do you guys have any tips about that?
Well, I think knowing the audience is the first kind of jumping off point when you are writing those book proposals, because you have to think, who are you selling to? When it comes to that marketing side of things, you are essentially just selling the book that you've written. So what I want to make sure with my clients is that they know who they're selling to, they know why their reader wants to read this book, and then from there they can kind of tweak the message and add in the marketing lingo and think about the different keywords that stand out, and think of all of the other elements that are a little bit more technical that kind of rope into book proposals and marketing and all of those different materials. And at Leaders Press, we are able to help them throughout that process, not just as they're writing the content of the book or they're writing the marketing materials, but beyond from there. At that point in the process, when I work with clients through Leaders Press, that's when I usually hand things off to Deborah or to Grace or to, our amazing team. So if you guys want to talk more about past the writing of the book, that'd be awesome.
Well, I think for marketing, we handle much of that work for our clients. So we have a team who's putting together some marketing copy. They research keywords that should perform well in the genre and the subject of our clients' books. And we really just bring that all together, make sure it gels and fits for the promotion that we do behind the scenes. I think that advising someone who is trying to do those parts themselves would be a very different beast and maybe more time than we have to go into today.
I think the sequence of events is really important because, we've all heard about, or maybe we all know about, an author who's had the manuscript that they've been working on for the last 10 years, coming from their heart. They pour their heart and soul into it, and then they bring it to somebody who's not very compassionate and just marketing oriented like myself and show it to me, and I struggle trying to fit it into a genre that would make sense to make it fit in so that there's an audience that wants to read it, and then work on it again to make it stand out. So that's why when we work with clients, the first thing we want is only the book idea, just the book idea, And when we have the book idea, we can then position it really well so that it sells. And I think it could be a huge struggle, getting 100,000 word manuscript in a genre that there's no audience for. What are the signs? Like, what are the signs that nobody's going to read it? I think one of the signs is when somebody tells you, you ask, okay, so who's this for? What's the answer? Everybody. Okay, so when somebody says this is for
Oh, God.
everybody, okay, you should already have the sirens on. Okay, this is for everybody. I don't know if there's actually going to be anybody who will want to read it, and that comes as a shock to so many authors. Like, what do you mean? I spent 10 years writing this. Well, yeah, so it's interesting to you, maybe your family members, but I wouldn't count on them reading it anyway. It depends on the family, but it's all about marketing. And we get books on those best-selling lists, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, almost 200 authors on those lists. Yeah, those are lists that list best-selling books, okay, not best written books or books that have been written for the largest number of years. Okay, so it's all about sales and it's all about marketing. But of course you do need a quality book, because you could potentially take a picture of your foot, like one author I think did, self-publish it and get enough sales to get to Amazon bestseller status. You could probably do that. It's probably been done, but then in the reviews, the reviewers will trash it then. Okay, so you don't want to have all negative reviews. That's why the quality of the book becomes important at a second stage, though, right? Because first they buy, then they read it, right? And this also comes as a shock. What do you mean? Yes, first they buy, they haven't read it. They buy first, then they read. But then when they actually get to reading the book, then the content is important. And if you're an entrepreneur or a business professional, you do want to make sure that whoever you're giving this book to or whoever is buying this book will think about you as more of an authority, because you're the author. So how do we make sure that this book is top notch when it's written by the author? Because when we do ghostwriting, like, we know, our editors know that when we send books to them that have been ghostwritten by our writers, these are already well-written books and they don't have a lot of work to do. But when we get books that are manuscripts and then we send those to our editors, that's when they start pulling their hair out, because of how they're written. And in some cases, Megan could potentially be a writing coach. We've done that in the past. How do you make sure that this is, the books are well written so that our editors don't pull as many hair out?
I think the biggest thing is going back to what we talked about with who is this book for? And that's a choice. Choosing your audience is a specific choice that authors have to make. It's not always easy because you don't want to limit yourself to women over 40 or fitness coaches or hairdressers. You don't want to limit yourself, and many authors are nervous to kind of do that. And that also translates into the content of the book. They want to shove in every idea that they've ever thought was helpful or thought was insightful or thought was illuminating. They want to make sure it's all in the book so that the reader's getting as much out of the book as they can. But that's not always helpful when all of these ideas that are shoved into the book don't have a clear message and don't have a clear flow for the reader to follow. So one of the main things that I work with our clients on is asking them to really look at every idea, every sentence that they're putting into the book, and asking them to think about how it supports their main idea or the idea within the chapter or their main message. If an idea is kind of just shoved in there or a concept is shoved in there just because it sounds great, it's not going to make the book that much better. So a lot of what I do with our clients is really helping them edit their own work so that when it does get to the editor, the editor knows what this book is about, they can follow it, and then they can focus on the tinier details of, spelling, grammar, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. One of my favorite authors, William Goldman, who writes scripts, he was saying that a good author writes structure. You don't think you think it's snappy dialogue, or you think and that's what makes a great author. And he's like, no, that is like the icing on the cake. That is the last thing that should be coming in. And like what you're saying, knowing how to remove something you love to make something really tight that really appeals to the core audience you've selected, which again, like Alinka and Megan, you were both touching on that. It's so important from the beginning to be thinking of your audience and to be doing that market research and really honing in on who that is. And that's what you get when you come to us. Yeah, I think that's so, so key. And I know that one of the other things we wanted to talk about was kind of motivation, avoiding burnout and writer's block. And Deborah, you wanted to add something about deadlines, which I think could kind of help with that maybe.
Well, deadlines are critical to staying on track. And I think that having someone else help impose those deadlines is important because, you set your own deadlines. You're like, well, I can change it. I'm the one who made it up. But if you have a partner who's working with you in establishing those deadlines for you, I think they have a little more weight than if you were just doing it on your own. And as that relates to burnout, it's important to pace yourself and to not have an unreasonable goal. Goals are important, but they need to be achievable. You can challenge yourself, but you don't want to overwhelm yourself. So I think, again, having like a writing coach, they can help you realize when maybe you're being too ambitious and you just need to give yourself a little bit of a break or a little bit of breathing room and make sure that you develop a timeline that is appropriate and that you can achieve. Because, each time you achieve that, each time you make that like miniature deadline, it just builds your confidence up for carrying you through the rest of the project.
I think one thing I want to add to that is there's a way when you're given just a deadline of write a chapter in a week, that can be very overwhelming because there's an infinite amount of possibilities that go into that chapter. So one of the things that I do as a writing coach is find those either questions or prompts or something like it that can help the author actually think about what they're writing and give them kind of a task to do within the larger chapter. When I write for myself, like outside of Leaders Press, and I write fiction and I find myself experiencing burnout, I always ask myself a random question about the characters that are in my book. I think, how would they cook a meal? How would they react to this movie? How would they whatever? And those different perspectives and different tasks help me get back to the computer and keep writing. So not all of our clients are writing fiction. Most of them are writing nonfiction, but there is still a way that I try to approach these kind of prompts and give them something else, another way to look at the book and another way to say, can you tell this story differently? Or what would happen if you told this story or use this example in a different chapter? And that usually helps to get people out of burnout and keep writing again.
Awesome.
What about the blank page? Somebody's staring at the blank page, not knowing what to do. How do you get them, out of that zone?
I like to say, and I've used this advice with some of our previous clients, is to turn on the dictation on Microsoft Word and just talk about the subject. Because a lot of people, they can talk people's ears off about a subject, but once they get to the computer, they freeze and they don't know how to write it. And I know I use a very conversational tone. So for me, that shift is, kind of small, but using that as a jumping off point and just, or turning on the tape recorder, whatever you need to do, and just chatting about, the story you want to tell or the message that you want to share, why that's important. And you'll start to see the words form, whether it's through dictation or you kind of transcribe your own writing. So that's a good way to just get started and at least get some words on the page.
Awesome. And I also Yeah, to return to what Alinka was saying about kind of the quality of the work and a deeper understanding, what are different means we can use to kind of assess their work? I know sometimes we get editors involved, or are there different means, different tools?
I personally use different tools like Grammarly. I think helps for just to elevate the, reduce conciseness or reduce redundancy, and keep the work tighter, and address any small, grammar issues like that. I think a
Grammarly, and
writing
just for the people at home, Grammarly is like a free tool that checks your spelling and grammar, and like you say, checks for redundancies, and it's a great tool that anyone should have. I use it just for business emails. So yeah, what were you
Yeah,
saying?
it's a great starting off point, to kind of elevate what you're doing. I also think just having a writing coach is the best tool that you can have to elevate your quality, because that's another person, someone who's experienced in writing nonfiction, who can look at your work and, read it from the perspective of both a reader and a writer, and give you the steps that you need to go back, to erase the things that are not necessary, to tighten up the sections that are a little wordy, and to, elevate some sections. There are going to be things that a writing coach sees that you're not going to see when you read over your work, or even if you listen to your work or whatever. Yeah, a writing coach is the best kind of source to elevate everything.
You mean you can't rely on your mom or sister or brother to give you the professional feedback they need?
Unless they're a writing coach, I would probably say no. And that's the funny thing, is there are a lot of people who will hand their manuscript to 10 different people. They're going to get 10 different opinions, 10 different suggestions on how to rewrite the section, rewrite the chapter, rewrite the book. And not all of those people are going to be professional writers as well, or have the knowledge that the author has, or have the same perspective as the author. So I tend to suggest that authors don't give their manuscript to 10 people who are not necessarily qualified beta readers or writing coaches, just so that they can focus on getting their message, their perspective, their experiences across. And using a writing coach, using an editor, using like every resource that Leaders Press has to offer to elevate that message, so that when they do hand it to their mom, their brother, whoever, that message clearly gets across, and then the reader can use that message how they wish.
Yeah, I think it's about having the people working with you to be aligned with your goals. And your family members might not even understand what you're doing,
Yep.
in your job. Like I live in a small town and I'm keep a low profile. So the people that I hang out with, they think that I, sell books, which is part of what I do. But if I was to give them a outsource your book that we use to explain to people what we do, I think they would be pretty blown away because they had no idea. So you want them aligned, and if with your goals. That's also why you probably shouldn't share some of your goals or whatever is on your vision board. If you have a vision board, if somebody's not aligned with it and not motivating you to go after that, because what can happen, like what usually happens when you do that. So you can say my goal, financial goal is, okay, fill in the blank. And what are the reactions? Like one reaction could be total indifference. Another reaction could be like, you're crazy. Who do you think you are? Like that's never going to happen. So they pull you down. And in some cases, it will be positive. But probably 95%, there's a 95% chance that they will want to crush it, either consciously or unconsciously, because they're not there yet, for example. And the same with the book. Maybe you're showing your manuscript to somebody who's secretly jealous, and they will be sabotaging the success of it because you have a book, you're going to become an author, they're not. Or maybe they are an author, but you're showing them this book that is better than what they have produced. So I think it's really important to keep your, goals or sort of your, those babies protected. Like when you're pregnant, you usually don't tell the first 3 months. I think when you're doing the book, you should probably, start telling when it's, formatted. and you have those author copies, the advanced review copies to share. And with your financial goals, I mean, those you should never share. Maybe once you've made, the Forbes 500 list that you are after, and it's out anyway, it's out there. I mean, you can no longer hide it. Okay, then that's the moment to share. But just it's really important to protect those, those pregnancy periods whenever you're constructing anything. And a book is a baby like that. So I'd be really careful who I show, my book to before it's out.
I love that metaphor because it is true. I mean, I've not experienced pregnancy myself, but the what I have seen from people who are pregnant is that, I mean, everyone just tells them what to do, and everyone's going to tell them what to drink, what to eat, don't go near the microwave, don't eat fish, whatever, all this advice that, could come from a good place. But in the end of the day, it's about the person who is pregnant and their child and whatnot. It's the same way with a book. So that's a great metaphor. I'm going to tell all my clients that.
I think the main danger is that you're never going to finish it. That's going to be the 10-year in the making manuscript in my drawer that last time I showed somebody, they killed my dream. And, now I actually want to do it. So that's why a writing coach.
That's a great point, though, that like too critical feedback can really kill it. So what's the way to give really good constructive feedback that, avoids that burnout or that writer's block and keeps them motivated, but at the same time does elevate their work and does critique it?
I think it's going back to the client's goals, the author's goals, and what they want out of the book. And that is, again, something that a writing coach is going to know where the family member or the friend might not know. All of my critiques are, based on, is this something that will help you get the message you want to share across? And I think it's framing it in that lens allows me to talk to my clients in a way that we're on the same page, pun intended. And we have the same goals, and we want this message to get across. And because I spend enough time with the authors that, I usually am believing in their mission too, and I want to share that message as well. So it's about sharing critiques that are never saying that something is bad or never saying that something is, wrong, but explaining, does this help share the message that you have, or is it just going to send the reader off in a different direction? Is it going to confuse the reader? Is it going to X, Y, and Z?
God, it sounds a lot like therapy. Like you're this neutral party. You can just ask questions and not be too judgmental, unlike a family member who's going to be like, have all this baggage coming to your book and your manuscript.
Yeah, in general, coaches, are the ones that are going to ask questions, whereas advisors are the ones that are going to give the hard advice. And when you are a coach and when you ask those questions, you allow the author to really think harder and think in a different way about their book, which is, what is going to help them share the information, share the message that they need to ultimately reach their goals.
Last question, I think, and then we can start wrapping up. Megan, for the entrepreneurs listening, what is the best way to find a writing coach? And I bet, okay, listening to you, I'm pretty sure that there will be a lot of requests to work with you, but what is a good way to find a writing coach that will, do the job well?
I think what's important is, while you're doing your research, get in touch with the writing coach, or in our case, like Leaders Press, and talking about what your book goals are, where you are with your manuscript, and talk about the process that your writing coach or writing services will use to help you reach your goal. And if you feel that you are aligned with that process, that's a good place to keep going forward, because it is, it is kind of like a therapy or a coaching. It is a coaching session where it is personal, and it is a message that is personal to you. And it's, writing a book can be almost a sensitive topic at sometimes. So you want to make sure that you really vibe with the coach or the company that you're working with, and that you feel good when you show up to the first writing coach meeting, and you're ready to go and you're ready to do the work to make your book great.
Woo!
Phenomenal. All right. Well, thank you so much, Megan. Super exciting to have you here today.
Thank you again for inviting me. I love talking about all of this. So.
Thank you for listening. This has been the Leaders Get Published podcast, brought to you by Leaders Press. Don't miss another episode, and subscribe today at leaderspress.com/subscribe. And if you'd like to discover which type of book you should write, go to leaderspress.com/reveal.